Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. This is the Low Code Approach, and today we are joined by Wendy. Wendy, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Haddad. It's like huh and then dad.
Okay, Wendy Haddad, who is a senior cloud solutions architect at Microsoft, tons of background in low code and low code governance, and a rather interesting history. And let's actually start with that. Can you give us an introduction of kind of like how you got into low code? And how you landed at Microsoft as a CSA.
You're going to laugh. The story starts when I'm 9 years old. My parents decided that it was good to sign me up for competitive robotics. And Dean Kamen, who invented the Segway and the diabetic insulin pump, has a competition called First Lego League. So it goes back to 9-year-old playing with Legos. And I was the youngest person on the team. And I got left out of all the cool, let's build the robot, let's do the research stuff. And I kept getting pushed away. And I was like, someday I'm going to be the most important person on this team. And in all my 9-year-old wisdom, I figured out that nobody wanted to program. And programming was literally like dragging and dropping. The newest one is like NXTG or whatever, but it was a visual software very similar to Power Automate. You drag and drop visual elements on the screen, and that's your programming language. And so I was like, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to be the most important person. And so competed for 6 years and worked my way up. And I wouldn't say it was actual programming, but just learned all of those concepts. And then trained, I judged and coached for another 6 years. And then I actually wound up taking a detour. I wound up running and creating a educational technology department at a university. So detour from low code. But from there, went to a Fortune 500 entertainment company and was doing customer success and training and adoption for various software products, and was hired for non-Microsoft products and very quickly switched over to Microsoft. And I discovered Power Automate and I fell in love. A friend of mine, Rex, calls it playing with digital Legos, which resonated with my 9-year-old background. And I loved the idea that I could create automation to do more. I've got a productivity background myself. And so I started just building things for my team and seeing benefit there. And then said, I got to get involved with this. So started volunteering for stretch projects and helped create a center of excellence and community, and started doing training sessions. From there, I was actually asked to become a service manager. Officially, it was SharePoint I think I was hired for, and very quickly it became over 30 services over my 4 years in the role of service manager across Microsoft. So anything from SharePoint to Power Platform to Azure, so Planner to do, which really was kind of a fun global mindset, but I kept weaving Power Platform in there somewhere. I was having fun with it. And then Microsoft came calling and offered me this role to do, work with customers in their adoption and training consulting and removing roadblocks for adoption for Power Platform, and was pretty passionate about this space and was needing a change and thought this was an interesting adventure. So I've been here about 7 months, but I'm loving it so far and really enjoying this space around low code, no code, and just the variety of seeing now how the Power Platform is used in different companies and businesses across the world.
Nice. That's cool. I think you at 9 years old and me at 9 years old are two opposites. I was trying to figure out.
I was going to say, how did you get into low code, no code?
It started when I was 9 years old and I was trying to determine what's the best Ninja Turtle. But much later in life, thanks for asking, by the way. I stumbled across into SharePoint, like most SharePoint admins do. They are voluntold that they need to go and work on it. So I did that for a while as a SharePoint admin, SharePoint developer. And, workflow is always a huge component of SharePoint. You need to automate things to be successful within SharePoint. So I came across another low-code automation company, worked there for about a decade, wearing numerous hats like technical enablement manager. So I built out curriculum for them, MERN stack development for them, just a pre and post sales engineering. So a whole bunch of different roles, a bunch of fun stuff. But the entirety of the time, you see the impact of low code on organizations. And just like there's Power Platform and Microsoft, and it's so attractive. There's so many cool tools and features that can be used within it. And it's super exciting. So I jumped at the chance to work with Microsoft.
I'm curious. I know you're interviewing me, but I'm going to interview you back. So,
oh boy,
were you formally trained in programming or development or any of this? I know you said low code. My degree in college, I was a music major. Everything has been pretty much self-taught. I got a music scholarship and changed my major to music to pay my way through. And so I would not consider myself a programmer or a developer, even though I trained them and I worked very closely with them throughout my career. I'm curious about your journey, or have you gone more of the formal training and now you're dipping your toe back in low code, or?
No, I'm what you would consider like a street coder, right? Did a boot. Boy.
Were you formally trained in programming or development or any of this? I know you said low code. My degree in college, I was a music major. Everything has been pretty much self-taught. I got a music scholarship and changed my major to music to pay my way through. I would not consider myself a programmer or a developer, even though I trained them and I worked very closely with them throughout my journey. Or have you gone more of the formal training and now you're dipping your toe back in low code, or?
No, I'm what you would consider like a street coder, right? Did a boot camp, did go to university for IT and network administration. Quickly realized I hated network admin work, and I did have a programming class on there, and it was coding with Visual Basic. And that should give you a timeline of how old I am. And so I built a scientific calculator with that and felt like a god, and I wanted to continue programming. And I think the good part about that, though, is you learn some computer science fundamentals, and you understand how to build solutions either using conventional development languages and frameworks or low code, and you're able to translate that between the two to build these robust, almost enterprise ready solutions that take into account everything from proper development techniques to governance and security in the background of it, and data structures and data types too. So there's a whole lot to take from it and a whole lot that can translate between the two. But I am like gobbling up all the time on this. So let's go back to the interesting person in this conversation. You mentioned you weren't a developer, but you did train people to be successful with low code. What did that look like? How did that interaction go? And how did you set up those that may have had no development background, low code or pro code, to be successful to use low code tools like Power Platform?
It's an interesting question. I think it's a bit of a journey. I tell people my superpower is being able to speak two languages, right? I can speak in terms of the like super technical, let me work with your engineers and your architects and your developers. And then I'm able to translate that into something anyone can understand. And I think it's really just because I'm not afraid to ask the dumb questions and be like, I don't get that. Let's simplify that or restate it back. To be honest with you, a lot of it has been knowing how to research and just growing up and competing different work projects, learning how to research myself and self-educate. But I've also been surrounded by incredibly smart people, whether on the Power Platform side or just development side, and thinking through engineers and architects and developers I've worked with in the past, who I think if you're willing to put the time in, they're willing to share their knowledge with you if you know how to ask the right questions. And so even at Microsoft, I've rewritten like the Power Apps class here. I don't believe any concept is too hard to learn. It might be harder because I don't have that background, but in some ways I'm advantaged because now I know how to explain it, right? I have to wrestle through the questions myself. Some of it, like the Power Apps class, I actually reworked it because I made a ton of mistakes. I jumped into my first app. I designed the app without really designing my data source. Bad idea, right? And so I'm like Frankensteining this whole thing. I was just mocking up something, very excited that I could okay, what if we use Power Apps or whatever? I never expected it to become the production app for a major project. It took off and it wasn't scalable and it was a complete mess. And then my developer friends coming in very gently, Wendy, you can't build it this way. You need to think through your I built on SharePoint list, right? You need to think through your SharePoint list and not put spaces in the column names and, all that jazz, right? And so a lot of it's learning by mistakes and then, being able to reflect on that and capture the mistakes as you make it. And, I'm like, if I'm making a mistake, I bet you everybody else has the same question and may just be afraid to answer it. So I try to teach my classes assuming that everyone's going to make the same mistakes I did. So let me walk you through that thought process. As an old manager of mine used to say, put the cookies on the lowest shelf, right? I'm always quick to acknowledge when I don't know something. And so there's areas where I can say, I can speak about a 50,000 foot level of what's possible. But if you want to start coding or developing, I need to either take some time and get up to speed or loop in someone else. There's strong relationships and partnerships that come with it too. But definitely, I think that thinking through the thought process of, I've never done this before. I'm what we call a citizen developer, right? Or a business developer. And I have thoughts around that term with personas. But
I want to let our listeners know that air quotes were strong with those terms that you put out in case they never see a video.
Well, let me go there. I just having come as a former customer, I think the citizen developer term is appropriate but confusing. So I tend to break it out into different personas that the Power Platform is for. If you think about it, first of all, it's for the end users, right? Ultimately, we are building things that other people are going to use and benefit from. It could be an app, it could be a website, it could be a workflow or something else. And sometimes we're the consumers of our own product, but sometimes you've got people who have no idea what a Power App is. It's just something that they go to online or on their phone, and it does it, and that's all they care about. And then you have what I'm going to break citizen developer into two different groups. So citizen developer, if I can, I know you're in marketing, but if I can repurpose the term.
Alarms are going off right now.
I was going to say, I know I'm going to be kicked off the island here, but short Microsoft career. But, if I take citizen developers, I have worked in my time with people who they're not afraid of technology, but they're like me. They have no background, right? No formal training. They see a problem. They know how to Google an Excel formula, right? And push an Excel a little bit further, create a workflow and an Outlook rule or something else to do something, right? And because they're not afraid of the technology, they use it, their team starts relying on them more. Then you have what I would call the power user. And these are the people that I've worked with who, again, they don't have developer in their title or in their job, but I would say they're more technically inclined, kind of like what you said, a street coder, right? They've gone deeper. They've learned and either self-educated or maybe an old programming class. They've learned some of the best practices. They may not be formally in IT or development, but they're capable of more responsibility. It's like my toddler. You can get more responsibility as you're more capable of things. I call those our power users. So we've got our citizen developers, our power users, our end users. And then you have your formal pro developers, right, who are bringing in Visual Studio Code. They're, doing things with YAML and they're modifying programming language. They're bringing their own programming language to it, expanding it. They might be Azure specialists, right? So leveraging our Azure tools. They're working together, and then all within the confines of IT, right? IT is another stakeholder in here, and they can benefit from this as well. And so all of these groups are working together to solve similar problems. And the ratio, the amount that the problem is solved by a citizen developer versus a power user or pro developer, I think we're using the term fusion development now. We've talked about other things as well, but that's really coming together and saying, okay, each of us lends our expertise in our areas. I've seen it done. I've done it actually, supporting a business user who built a virtual agent. The only thing they needed help with was the authentication piece. I'm not going to say that's easy, but that's a very small amount of time from IT or a pro developer versus IT having to go ahead and program an entire chatbot. And so your citizen developer, who's the subject matter expert, can do that and create incredible value for the company, can iterate faster and fail faster. But then from a security standpoint, IT or your power user, your pro developer who's been trained in these more advanced concepts can come in and just help them over the speed bump so that they're able to build a compliant virtual agent or chatbot, right? Yeah. And so kind of really playing together is, I think, acknowledging going back to your question, how do you train people? It's making it clear where things are hard and where, knowing your persona, and then at what point is something really intended for a persona that's more technical or has more expertise so that you know early when to engage the right people.
No, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So like there's a trend I've been
Hmm.
picking up on in what you've been talking about, and it kind of lends towards something we were chatting about a little bit before we started recording, which is just how powerful platform is. And I think you actually summed it up with, power platform is more powerful than you think it is. And as you know, you're going into the different types of personas that can utilize it. What do you mean by that? And what are some examples that you've seen where Power Platform is just like, my goodness, like you can do some awesome stuff?
This is something that I've honestly been stewing on for probably about 2 years. So before I joined Microsoft, as a service manager, I was trying to work with legal and security and operations and our training teams to roll out various aspects of the Power Platform securely. And as part of that, you do security architecture reviews, or you have to write. I'm kind of the service manager in the middle, right? And you're working with legal on a summary of what you're doing. And so something called Power Apps rolls out. And I'm trying to help them understand, what is this? How are we positioning it? What are the guidelines? And when I talk about the Power Platform being more powerful, it's, I think, first of all, because one of the questions I always had to answer is who's going to be using it. And it is for citizen developers, and it's for pro developers. There can be elements of pro code and no code in the Power Platform. But just kind of thinking through the wheel, like if you think about, you've got the core Power Platform, right? So that's all the marketing posters that you see. Sorry, I'm going to pick on marketing a lot today, but that's all the, like, you know what I mean? Like the graphic of, you've got Power Apps and Power Automate, Dataverse, virtual agents, Power BI, AI Builder. We just announced Power Pages, which was broken out from Power Apps, and then Power FX, right, which was also just announced. And I think now managed environments for IT admins specifically.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the official Power Platform. But it's just like the outer shell of the onion. And as you start peeling it back, example is Power Apps, right? Power Apps is the name of the product. There's 3 types of Power Apps. There's a Canvas app, which is a blank canvas, right? It could be really, really simple, and you can use templates with it, all the way up to, you can integrate pro code there, right? And build very complex things. I would say that's a little bit of a gray area. You have SharePoint list apps, which is more of your info path replacement, customizing those SharePoint list forms. I'd say that's a little bit more on the low code side. Not that you can't customize with pro code, but in terms of the intended audience, I see it more on the low code side. Model driven apps, dependency on Dataverse, you're structuring around your data, and then Power Apps is building it for you. And so that licensing, right, requires additional licensing. But in addition, it's really more, you have to know your data. And that requires Wendy not just spinning up a SharePoint list with no data structure or schema before she builds her app, right? That requires a little bit of knowledge and thought, before you jump in there. I'd put that more in the power user to pro developer camp. And so you can start mapping this out. I mean, I could go around. Power Automate has Cloud Flows, which is most commonly known, but we also have robotic process automation with desktop flows, and then a brand new tool, Process Advisor, that has task mining. So you could record user actions on a desktop and then identify options for automation, and that could use either desktop or Cloud Flows. Or you could go process mining through event logs, right? Upload your event logs, and then we'll advise where you can have automation, which is so cool. But I think we tend to think of Power Automate first being just Cloud Flows, right?
Yeah.
And so so understanding that there's differences in each of the tool can really help you understand and start to position. Well, it's not just about how do I position Power Automate as a whole. It's, okay, how do I position Cloud Flows? How do I position, model-driven apps, right? What persona, what level of security and scrutiny am I putting onto that? Because that will determine how I roll out the platform and customize it for my company.
So there's multiple levels to each one of the products and the feature set that's available to you as you're, building out these solutions. In your experience and training others and seeing how organizations are kind of picking up low code adoption, is the usual enablement journey that you like identify one of those offerings, either apps or automate or pages or whatever, and say, I'm going to go from end user to citizen developer to power user to pro dev on this, and I just want to become great at this before I move on to the next one? Or is it I want to be good at all of these, great at none? Or should somebody specialize in one and then translate those learnings to the other offerings in Power Platform? Is there no recommended journey? You figure it out.
I hate
What
to
would
say
you
it, but
say?
it's probably a little bit of the latter.
Oh
It
no.
depends. First of all, it depends on if you're asking me that question from a developer or citizen developer, the maker,
Yeah.
or if lens, or if you're asking me that question from the IT admin lens. From the maker lens, it really depends on on the problem you're trying to solve. I wouldn't recommend learning a technology that's not going to help you solve the business problem, right? It delays the value, it adds complexity, and it adds frustration and confusion. I think having a general understanding, and by the way, all of this, like knowing what is in the Power Platform, if you go to the Microsoft Learn docs and you search Power BI, you can actually see a table of, okay, here's all the pieces of Power BI, or I just did this last night, Power FX. I'm not a programmer, right? I understand the concept. Power FX is around the expression language. It used to be a Canvas app, and now we're making it the expression language of the Power Platform. And now we're doing a bring your own code a little bit, or at like an open source approach to that. All of the features are in a list. You can even just get a short list of what you enable and how you position that. That's all in the Microsoft Learn docs, to peel back the onion, if you will, on each of these. So from a user standpoint, I think having a general understanding of what are the capabilities and knowing that the Power Platform is zero cliff, right? So it can scale up to Azure. And if you need more advanced tooling, or you can use data gateways or ALM with solutions, et cetera, command line interface, right? With other things, going more truly into the pro dev, pro code, knowing where those limits are and the tools available at topically are good, but knowing how to build it is different. For an IT admin, I would say that there's a certain level of Power Platform access that is included in your basic licensing, E3 or E5, when you pay for an email account, right? And that's really more intended for personal productivity or non-business critical usage. There's premium licensing and offering, and managed environments is one of those services, right? Where you've got premium governance solution to allow more security and more support and more power in the Power Platform, if you pardon the pun a little bit. But if you're trying to invest in more business critical solutions or complex solutions, there use more application lifecycle management and use more structured industry standard approach to governance and security. So I would say, first of all, understand we have got a criticality matrix that we post on some of our Microsoft docs, kind of walk you through. It's just a guide, but every company has to determine for themselves, right? What risk tolerance, what they want to allow. I could have a tech only company, a development company. Your citizen developers can probably run circles around the citizen developers in a healthcare industry or whatnot, right? And so within reason, figuring out like what's included in my license and what am I using for personal productivity. Let's define personal productivity and start there. And that's across all of them. So I would say Cloud Flows, Canvas apps, SharePoint list apps, and Canvas apps with guidance, right? Certain connectors or whatnot. Maybe not, Dataverse for Teams, the Power BI service, the online service, and then the built-in expressions, and then virtual agents inside of Teams, right? Those would be kind of across the gamut. Some of the really no code to very low code, easier entry aspects that likely, as long as you have basic security, poses little risk.
Yeah.
And then you can start from there, rolling on and saying, okay, Power Apps or Power Automate solves the majority of our business needs. Let's start focusing on model-driven apps, or let's do authenticated virtual agents we can embed outside of Teams, right? And figuring out what that is, and then saying, okay, now we've gone through the criticality, we've positioned it against personas, we have a support model, we've thought through that, and then you start it's a cycle. You start rolling it out and maturing it, but you're not trying to boil the ocean. you're maturing each individual piece of the product, as it makes sense for you. It's like a buffet, right? You're picking and choosing there as well.
Nice, nice. So we are definitely going long on this podcast. So we're going to actually go and have to do a second one, a follow-up, because there's lots more that I want to chat to you about, especially this term that you used before called service manager. And I think you hinted at a few of the aspects of the role, but I want to dig deeper into that, and hopefully you can tell us a little bit about what that prior life was like. How did the service manager role help organizations, balance between security and innovation and things like that? So we hope everybody joins us for the next one. It should be coming out shortly. And Wendy Haddad, thank you so much. We're going to chat again in a little bit.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.